Howdy, Sacred Mountain coming back here with a real fun chapter. So, this chapter on the county of Kern, there's a couple things I want to say about it before I get started. Everything that I wrote about when I worked there was public information. Every project I worked on was public information. All of my notes are in files in the county, and you can even request to see them and extrapolate all the information that's in this book. So technically, I don't think I'm a whistleblower, but so be it, whatever. Okay, second thing. In the last chapter of the book, we do score an awesome pirate's treasure, and I'm going to be displaying some of them. These are the first ones I cut on my tile saw that I did for my house, which is crazy. But I got a opal bear here. He's real cool. And a really nice piece of serpentine. Woo! And this is actually the very first thing I cut, which is a pyramid, and I get to this in a later chapter on the evil people that are ruling our world and how they're all connected to that stuff. It's really weird. Okay, cool. Here we go. So, more important, right? In the book, yes, it's kind of like an adventure book with my wife, and she's kind of like my Huckleberry Finn. So, Wendy, please introduce yourself. She looks real pretty today. Come here, babe. This is my wife, and I may ask her to help me read. I do have brain damage, and writing this was very difficult. Reading it is even harder, so bear with me if I jumble my own words up a bit. Yeah, okay, I guess we're ready. Yeah, this is a wild one. Now, the book finally starts to get real interesting. Okay, chapter 6, the county. So I'd worked with JJ, stayed at home wallowing in my unemployment, and now I decided I would get into real estate. Wendy had a client that I worked with Wendy had a client that worked in the Los Angeles area, Hacienda Heights, and did really well. We had gotten screwed over by our real estate broker who sold us our ranch, and doing the research over the private drive easement was quite interesting. However, for me, the deciding factor was made up while watching this movie called Grosse Pointe Blake, which had a real estate agent in it who was smoking bud, like the whole movie. I love that. You see, back then, almost every job tested for cannabis, except real estate. I actually was going to be hired to manage the printing of newspapers every night in Bakersfield. I spent $50 on one of them tinctures to pass a drug test. I was not sure if they worked or not, and I still don't know if they work. I went to the drug test and got lost on the way, couldn't handle the pressure, and just took one of them little smokes on the way to the test. Of course, I failed the test. I say you can't smoke on the bottle, but it is stressful being lost in Bakersfield. Getting a real estate license seemed like the way to go. I thought I would do loans because I was good with numbers. What a joke doing loans was. I worked for a couple different lenders and put forth a real solid effort, but cold calling and solicitations was not my forte, apparently. It was actually funny. At one point, my cousin inquired about me doing a loan for her. I was working for a direct lender at the time, so I quoted an interest rate and got interest rate that got me no extra commission, just a half a point to do it. I was so proud of being able to do it for her. She actually spoke to her friend who was a lender and convinced her I didn't know what I was doing. She went with her friend and paid more. It's actually kind of shady how lending works. If you have a credit score above 640, then you qualify. I, as a lender, make a half a point. I don't do lending anymore. They look at your credit and tell you that they will be charging you above prime. For every point lender convinces you to pay above prime, they get a higher commission when it closes. The borrower pays for the extra 1 or 2 points every year for the next 30 years, but the slick lender gets his extra point or two commission up front. This is how it was for the direct lender I was working for. If you're getting a loan, best to shop around. I didn't last too long doing that. I then used my real estate license to sell manufactured homes. I worked for this one outfit in Bakersfield that is no longer in business. It was pure sales, and that old bastard named Red kept stealing all my sales. This old guy was most horrible, and when a commission is like $10K, it's a big deal. I worked for about 8 months, and in that time, he swindled me out of a handful of commissions. I never made a commission working there, and I left over the horrible excuse of a human that old piece of stuff read. I actually sold a triple wide with an extra room in a garage worth $15K to me, but old Red finished that off. To hell with it, right? Well, that company closed down a few months after I left. I figured old Red screwed over the owner in the end. Who knows? But it was sad that the owner went to bat for Red, his top guy. I thought the owner was a good person. We both lost in the end. I found myself once again unemployed. I never wanted to actually sell real estate, so I applied for a job with the county of Kern. Here we go. Oh, man. They had an open position for a licensed real estate person, and since I also have my bachelor's degree, I was the person that got the job. It was crazy experience. It was a crazy experience that had me rise to the point only to be torn down by the powers that be. The first day on the job, my employer Don, who ran the real estate department for the county, took me to get my badge and introduced me to different people I'd be working with, as well as my office. The best part of the job was my office. Better than the tiny paycheck or the huge responsibility was the office. It was on the third floor and the corner looking down on the corner by Rabobank Riga in Bakersfield. The keycard county badge had to be used to go through two different secure doors to get to the office, so it was really cool. I like to tell the boys I was a government agent, and technically that's true. A government real estate agent. See how that works? When I sell property, I like to tell some of my crazy county stories to clients depending on the situation or conversation. When Don hired me, I told him that I was a project construction manager and that I like completing projects. That is what defined my experience from beginning to the end. One of the small side jobs that I was given on top of my other deals was to manage the pipeline franchises. Anytime cost of electricity, gas, or water is brought up on a showing, I like to explain how ridiculous the franchise fees are. You know, the county charges any company needing to put a pipe or wire in a road right-of-way a franchise fee. It's basically a yearly lease or road right-of-way for oil, pipeline, water, or electric lines. For electric lines, they charge by the foot. It's crazy and less than a penny per foot, but that adds up. For all the franchises, I collected just over $6 million a year for the county of Kern, somewhere in there. It was just the fee. The county required that all the parties have AAA California rate insurance for the pipeline or electric lines. That wasn't too big of a problem for large oil companies, SCE or PGE, or who are probably self-insured, but the smaller water companies servicing small communities, they had to pay for high-cost insurance just to pipe the water to the homes that own the rights to it. Just the insurance required guarantee a higher water bill to homeowners, that some of which were sharing a community well. That's so stupid about it is that we, the people, grant the road easements to the government through our own properties, but they collect money from the right-of-way. Most people know that you own to the middle of the road, and the road is an easement. Crazy that they collect money off our land, which eventually comes from us through higher bills and gas prices. It's not double taxation before the oil hits the refinery. It's more like triple taxed. As I said above, oil companies have to pay for each pipeline that's in the road right away. Another thing that I was involved in doing, but only directly on 2 oil company lots, this is how it works. The county is on the land that is, this is how it works. All the oil in Kern County is on land that has protected wildlife. The blunt-lobe lizard and the kit fox were the main ones. I never liked these animals working at the county due to the crazy nonsensical mitigation measures. However, I have recently viewed both at the Calm Museum in Bakersfield, and they're real cute. They're like cute little guys. All that aside, this is how the law works. When I worked there, it was 2-to-1 mitigation. So if you bought land for drilling, you would have to pay twice as what you paid for the land to mitigate for endangered species. So there was a huge fund created for the state to buy land in the desert and fence it for the critters. What doesn't make any sense is that the land in the desert, mainly Cal City, is much cheaper than oil-rich land on the west side of the county. Back then, there was a large fund growing in the name of the state due to this discrepancy. This is why oil in Bakersfield is expensive. When gas prices are low, our workers are laid off. Costs too much to pump oil out at a low gas price, all in the name of lizard and fox, or most so ridiculous nature of government. Wonder what happens to all the money. Think it was well over $100 million just sitting in an account when I was there. Like, who knows now? That's all ad-lib. Okay, don't get me wrong, I was very proud of the important job that I was doing and the sweet government agent badge that I wore around my neck. I was involved in so many projects because I enjoyed doing them. Each one was interesting. My boss Don gave me a sweet special project coordinating the installation of an early warning siren system in Lake Isabella. It was for possible dam failure in case of an earthquake. There were supposed to be multiple sirens at the lake and others going down the 178 into Bakersfield. The federal government was supposed to pay for 2 sirens to be installed. So that is the only 2 that we did. Oops. It was my job to coordinate and head the Army Corps, and the head of the Army Corps gave me his credit card number. It took what seemed 2 months for the fire department and parks department to coordinate a place for the 2 sirens. One was behind the job training area in the parking lot. The other was in the park known as Tank Park for the World War II tanks at the entrance. We had multiple meetings at the park to decide where to put the sirens. In the end, they picked off to the side, but right near a natural water drainage. I told the fire department folks that was a bad idea, and they just bragged about their earth-moving equipment and how they could handle anything. It's still there. I did get reprimanded or spoken to on the job for meeting a pole setter on Saturday. I told Don it was okay because I didn't add it to my hours or anything, but that wasn't okay for liability, which I guess I understood. Another big decision was when to test the alarm. The fire department had a focus group of a small number of people from the lake, and they decided that 12 p.m. on Sunday was the day. I also chimed in that would interfere with church services, but was told that a focus group decided. I then asked if they did a drug screening on the focus group and received laughter, but I was serious. It is something I laugh about with folks to do this day. Don worked with the fire department to obtain 2 area sirens from back east. They used them for tornadoes. I was given the sirens, and when we were all ready to install, there was a major problem. The sirens didn't fit the poles. Back then, there was still a good old boy attitude to do things, and with that mentality, a caretaker for the parks department, a local guy, laddered to the top of the poles with a chainsaw and whittled it down until it fit the siren. I was featured in the county magazine for my efforts, but they should have given a medal to that parks guy, or better, a salary that he could have lived on. I was also given a business card with an IOU written on it on the back by the second in command of the parks department, which we're going to call for the book Mr. Magoo, for my efforts, and that comes up later. A big problem for me working for the county was the fact that with my commute expense, I really didn't make enough money to survive. Anytime my car would break or we needed extra money, I would have to borrow from my parents. It was tough to be handling multi-million-dollar projects and not make enough. Our department had a secretary, Gloria. She had been there for years and was making more than I was. However, that never bothered me. In my opinion, she handled more for the county than anyone. I worked with many good people, but the culture of government doesn't seem to reward hard work, but actually the opposite. For every hour of every day had to be accounted for on a computer system that bills my hours all day long to a project. And this it happens in all departments. This is crazy. This leads to projects never being completed, as there is an incentive to not finish so that you can still bill your day out. Because if you don't have anything to bill your day out, that's a problem. For example, the first day I was hired, I was told of a land exchange with the federal government in Kernville. The feds were swiping the fish hatchery, a storage yard, and probation's boys camp for Greenhorn Mountain. When introduced to the coworker, he bragged about being able to bill his time to that project for 6 years. Speaking about that project, after I had some experience, I was asked to handle the hiring of a professor to do a historical analysis of the swap. The boys' home and fish hatchery were considered historical places, which means that a transfer of title requires a historical study and at least a possible mitigation if anything is found. By this time, I was considered the go-to guy for the department of 5 people, so when things needed to be done, I was assigned. I actually loved it. Each project was so interesting. When my career ended, I was involved in 50 projects at any given time. It only took me a day to find a professor from Bakersfield College to bid and handle the project. It was done for the cost of $12,000, which wasn't too bad. Really. It was a big to-do with the county for all the historical analysis. There were multiple people from probation there, as well as me and a new special projects manager from general services. I'm sure about 20 people billed hours to go to this inspection in Kernville. That was actually the hilarious problem. The professor finished the inspection and was standing in the parking lot of his car. He slammed closed his blinder and said, "No new findings, so you're good." As soon as he said that, a low-level probation officer, not one of the department heads, yells out, "Hey, isn't this one of them things you're looking for?" It was a Native American grinding stone, basically a rock with a bit of a hollow in it that Native would use to crush and make food. They're all over the mountain, but this one ended up costing the county tens of thousands and, more important, time and BS to do the deal. The professor had to write another 100-plus page report, picture, measure, weigh, and then had to be published in the Library of Congress. They call them matatis. Not to mention, I think we had to pay a mitigation fee. Wonder if that moment affected the probation officer's career. Probably got promoted for extending the time county workers could bill hours to the project. I wonder if that exchange ever got done. I still don't know if it's done. The only hard part about working at the county was early mornings and having to clock your day each hour to a project. Oh yay, at the low pay. I was only the county for a couple years, and in that time I was involved in almost everything my department was handling. Out of 5 people there were in my department, 4 were scheduled to retire. I was working, pushing, and hoping for the top job. Up to a point I was being groomed for it. I was young and did some childish things, such as a Diet Coke pyramid in my office. And it was like, it took the whole window. It was very nice. I was told to take it down. However, due to my ability to complete projects, the powers that be were still happy with me. I complained about my salary because gas was a huge expense. I was given 3 raises. One they had to go to the Board of Supervisors for special permission. Raises in government are not done based on merit. Usually it's awarded based on how long you've been there. So getting an extra raise was a big deal. I was also awarded a medal for going above and beyond my duties as a government agent with a super cool badge. One of the biggest responsibilities I was given was to take over for Janice, who was retiring. This gal handled all of the county building leases. She would do it all from procuring the building, negotiating the lease, work construction specifications, take the lease to the board, and manage existing leases. That was her only job, but realistically, there should have been a team on that, but she got things done. She was the only one in the office drinking Monster Energy drinks. Guess that figures. I was only involved in a handful of leases before my exit from the county, but they were super interesting. It doesn't make sense, but most departments are not allowed to own the building they are in. This doesn't make sense. I was told it's so that the county doesn't have to handle building maintenance. However, the county then pays every month, never obtaining the benefit of real estate appreciation. In addition to having the county leases adjusted with the CPI indexes upward every year. So every year, the lease goes up every year for these buildings. This gets important later. It's crazy. I can't remember how many leases were managed, but it was a lot, like well over 100. One of the first leases that I worked on was swapping out the Employers Training Resource Center and Human Services for probation in a large glass building off Stockdale in California. In the county lease, there is a provision that if the budget is cut, then the county has the right to terminate the lease. That was the case for ETR. And Janice, at the time, had need for a home for probation's main office. So we canceled one lease and entered a new one. It was the first project that I had finished up for Janice. It was actually really interesting. The building didn't need a TI or tenant improvement construction as it was already suited for probation. There were only a couple of minor things that needed: a bulletproof glass at the front entrance counter and an extra exit. Because the county is prohibited from paying for the TI themselves, it is then worked into the lease and amortized over a negotiated term and interest rate. Also makes absolutely no sense for the government to borrow money to pay for construction. I only had a handful of meetings on the site to figure the TI and meet with the owner of probation. When we were nearing the end, I had a meeting with like 30 probation people there. It was funny, there was a huge round table, and I had been practicing in my mind what I would say. I am taking over for Janice, my cohort, in this endeavor. So when it came out, I said, consort instead of cohort. Oops. One is a work partner and one is a married couple. I don't think anyone caught it, but maybe a couple of them thought I was into older women. There was a couple of probation gals who started asking me about furniture islands, procurement, excuse me, placement. It wasn't general services job to handle furniture, but this was like fourth quarter and the department was moving in only a week or so. There was this one probation officer who was really helpful, and he reminded me of my brother Tim, which made him easy to talk to. I just pointed him out in front of everyone and said, "You can handle this, right?" From then on in, he was the building coordinator for that project, probation's main office. Did a great job handling all the office install issues. That wasn't a job I wanted. Ha ha ha. I think he was promoted over that. I don't know. Good guy, though. Anytime I have a client in law enforcement or anything I'm talking with an officer, I usually bring up the training facility. Another project that Janice was handling on her way out was the installation of the Kern County training facility adjacent to the airport in Meadows Field. The building was really unique as it had a roll-up door for helicopters to access the airport or be pulled in for storage. What's cool about it is that every officer I've ever encountered since the county has been trained in that building. This was Janice, and I've encountered quite a few. It's not cool. Well, some are cool. That's all ad-lib. This was Janice's project, but I went for her for the final walkthrough, and it was to take the lease to the Board of Supervisors for execution after the walkthrough, as she was retiring before. We are in this meeting, and we're standing in the hangar area of the building in the back, and one of the sheriff's guys says, "I love this building. I could see right into the women's showers." It was really funny, and you could see right into that bathroom. Apparently the restroom that Janice put in was prefab and brought into flatbed, and they didn't configure quite right. It was a small fix, but funny. Sure good icebreaker when speaking to the law. The first project that I handled by myself was the lease of the arson unit for the fire department. I was told by the fire department, you could, it's like kind of like some attitude about when I say fire department. There's a reason for that. You pick up that in a later chapter. I was told by the fire department that they had already found a building they wanted. I checked it out, and it was in line with what was going rate per square foot. Not that it mattered if it wasn't, as the fire department has the final word. It is their budget after all, and their time we're handling on our hours too. So I had to meet with the attorneys for the landlord. For a couple weeks, the landlord's attorneys kept sending over issues they had with the county leases. I can't remember the issues that they were arguing, but it didn't make much sense. We met at the attorney's office. Janice went with me for support. When we arrived, we were escorted into this fabulous meeting room with a large table and a fabulous view of Bakersfield. And every other chair said a lawyer or a lawyer's assistant. It was almost laughable. However, it was very difficult. It was very effective in catching us off our feet. However, the county lease is not changeable, so they're arguing about nothing. But yeah, it was funny. I did, however, get county counsel to accept dual indemnification, so we offered that. And actually, I started that at the county of Kern because this is all ad lib. Why should you get indemnification given, but one way and not the other? It should be both ways. Small win for the lawyer, at least some justification for all the billing that I'm sure happened. The fire department was eager to get this project done. They swung by my office and gave me donated tickets to the Condors hockey game. They also said that they would swing by my ranch sometime with a dozer and grade me whatever I wanted as practice. This way comes up later when I lose my ranch. That never happened. However, the hockey game was fun. We took Logan. He was just a kid back then. I went to construction services to draw the construction specification for the arson unit. They were really busy, and I suggested that if I needed a right-of-way that I just do it myself. The head of the department knew all my construction experience building grocery stores with my father, and this was an easy one. Not too much real construction needed. It was more writing the construction specs for non-split tile, decor, entrance and layout of the offices and living space, as well as the shower. The shower is one I like to tell people about because it is funny. They required that I write into the specs that a massive 12-person shower have a steam unit on it. Not a little one, but a commercial-grade, large steam shower. We were discussing the outflow of steam in the shower, and I asked where they wanted the partitions. See, they said they didn't need any partitions and not to worry about that, where the steam goes. You know their plans, but we like to some funny hanky going on there or something, because like, you know, there's no partitions. It's a giant steam shower for a bunch of dudes. I don't know. That's all I lived to. Sorry. The project was completed. The fire department was pleased. I did a lot of different things for the county other than what I've spoken about. A lot of easements and right-of-way work. I enjoyed all of it. Was interested in learning about everything. One thing that I handled was some work on the Lerdo prison. The first project I did was a lease of county land to a cattle farmer near the prison. The actual parcel was just south of the prison on the other side of the road. The parcel was being used by the prison as a leach field for the massive prison septic. The original lease for this ranch was up, and I had to redo the lease. When I was writing, I decided to add a provision that cattle not graze on the land because it was gross. This is septic, you know. The boss, Don, approved it, as well as the lawyers, so we added it to the lease, and I headed north to meet the rancher and get signatures. It was actually interesting to meet this good old boy. He had pictures of prime kit meat on private label for a very high-end grocery store, which I'm not going to name. When he was reading the lease, he started laughing. He asked about the provision. I said I added. He said that's a smart one. He doesn't use the land anymore, except for buffer from the prison. He said the guards think it's funny to release people in the middle of the night because they are in the middle of nowhere and can't get rides until the morning. He had problems with people trying to sleep in his barn and such. He said the first year he ran cows on the land, and did you know they came up with ringworm? Pretty gross. I asked, what did you do? All the time wondering if he was going to ask the county for a payback. Sure glad he didn't. He had the slaughterhouse take care of it. Glad I can't afford to shop at that store. My old man just happened to be involved in the purchase of that slaughterhouse for a client years back. It was one of my first little projects, and it was cool that this rancher knew my father. My old man was a heavy hitter in the meat industry. I later was training a new hire and doing easement plotting. I enjoyed it and was pretty good at it. So I taught the new hire to do plotting as well as use the GIS mapping. This gal was doing a map of the Lerdo prison for some expansion. I advised that she use the GIS and drawing tools so that it looked professional. Her and Dodd decided to hand draw a map over a blown up parcel map, if I remember right. The main point that it was that it was hand done, which should have been no problem if you're old school and good at it. The meeting with my supervisor, Don, and the prison people was looming, and this new hire hadn't finished the map before the end of the day, with the meeting in the morning. I was the last to leave, and she was going to pull overtime to get the giant map done. As I walked by, I saw the map in huge letters was titled Laredo instead of Lerdo. I told her it was wrong. Laredo is funny because of a recent movie that was out called Galaxy Quest, where an alien said Laredo. Personally, the family says Laredo to this day. Not so cool for Dawn and their new hire. They were apparently laughed out of the meeting, and the new hire lost her job over it. This was a crazy time as our department was all retiring, and I was going to be the only one left with experience. I was taken to lunch by one of the two main developers in the county. There are about 4 main players people who own large complexes or multiple county buildings being leased. I had an inkling of what this was about. You see, taking over Jan's position means I would be procuring and also leasing for ground-up builds, a big money, high-stress position that didn't pay shit. So I searched the county ordinance on what dollar amount was allowed for me, the super cool government agent with badge, to accept a lunch. It was $15. I think that's still a law. Maybe it's gone up. That used to be law. When I showed up to the super fancy restaurant, full white tablecloth meal in my honor, I had apprehension about this rule. You see, I wanted to make a statement about who I was. In my youthful ignorance, I figured that would be respected. I ordered a cup of French onion soup, which was an appetizer. It was $12, so I figured I was good. They laughed and asked me if I was on a diet. I'm pretty big, so I had to let them know the ordinance about the $15. That was the shortest, most uncomfortable lunch I've ever had. Like, we didn't even talk. Sure glad I only had a few bites to eat. Excuse me, gotta get going. I do now wonder if that lunch meant anything in the end. I still wonder this day. It wasn't all so serious, you know. Wendy had read this magazine article about how in Northern California, this company was tarping leach fields to collect natural gas for sale. They were paying the owner of the waste plant for the gas. It's actually really interesting, but a bit stinky. Yeah. I had burned my hand on gas out in the septic before. I know how powerful it can be. Anyways, I brought the article into the general services one day and let Don know about it. The county ran with it. They are always looking for more money. That was a good deal for everyone. County, air quality, and natural gas production. I credit it all to Wendy and Don. There are a lot of other things, little things that I was involved with, but not worthy enough for the book. One other sweet contribution Wendy made to the county was a deal with SCE. She was reading this article that SCE was willing to replace light bulbs in commercial buildings to energy efficient ones for free. Wendy then looked at it and they were willing to do county buildings. I passed the info on to Dawn and Janice. We redid about every major building the county leased. It was a win for everyone. My wife is awesome. The county saved money on electric and gets all new lights. SCE saves power consumption on a big scale. Huge buildings. The largest building that was done was the main human resources building, which is a full city block long and multiple stories. One reason the county is always looking for more money is they are so good at spending it. After I'd been there for a time, I was looking to get the top job, Don's job as director. I had put together a spreadsheet to track my projects that I was working on. I colored each one according to day's message and left, and work was done. I ran about 50 projects at any given time, and my trick was to make contact do something with each project every day. It was a great way to get things moving forward and also good for me billing my time. In my mind, it was better to take a lot of work on and have multiple projects for billing my day rather than sit on one project for 6 years. I did easements, leases, the pipeline franchise, special projects, and even came up with things like tarping waste facilities. Wendy did. Of course, I let the powers that be know about what I was working on. At the time, Donna answered to the head of General Services. After my list was circulated, Jerk, another name given there, the head of General Services decided to promote Magoo, the number 2 guy from Parks, and this other gal out of the Parks Department to General Services. Magoo was promoted over even my boss, Don, to the new number 2 now of General Services. That gal from Parks was promoted to a new position they created, the Special Projects Manager. Her first assignment was to take over the easiest thing I had to do. Janice had to figure the square footage of common area space of this building and allocated costs for that space to the 2 or 3 departments. It was for the Human Services building off Cottonwood Road, which I think is now named Martin Luther King Boulevard. So it consisted of measuring on the blueprint square footage of common space, then measure square footage of 3 tenants, then allocate common area space costs as a relation to the size of the 3 tenant spaces. So the new special project manager, who is now like a director of a 1-person department that just handled easy fun projects, asked me after getting the project from me, what do I do? I said it's easy to do that. I said it's easy. It will take about a day to measure and allocate. I told her she would have to get Dawn to allow me to bill to that project to help her. I got the feeling Dawn didn't like this situation too much. He told her that I was way too busy and she would need to handle it on her own. Most everything that we do goes to the Board of Supervisors to approve. I would send things to the board every week, whether it was a lease extension, easement, or special project, so I was always monitoring the board agenda and usually watching the meetings from my office to see that my items got approved. With great surprise to me, the next week's board meeting had a line item for the allocation of common area space in Cottonwood Martin Luther King Road Human Services Building. The new special projects manager had lined up an architect to do the one-day work, in my opinion. It was jaw-dropping to see that the bill was $250,000. We write out the numbers. County councils like us that way. The board approved it without even a question. Welcome to government. Now that I was managing all the county leases, I got a chance to really see how government works. You see, the director of each department are the head bosses. You are not allowed to question what they do. You can advise, but not question, even if what they're doing is unethical or skirting legality. And that is how it worked back then. I had this director come to my office. This is a wild story. Thinking back now with all the experience I've gained over the years, I should have known something was off with how forceful and cute she was with her conversation. She's walked in my office and said she needed the specific building for her voting machines to be stored, and she needed the building right away. She then told me that she was not willing to go to the board for a lease. She wanted me to enact an ordinance with the board of supervisors, not the lease, but she wants me to enact an ordinance allowing the jerk, head of general services, to lease the building for $10,000 per month for up to 10 years. Looking back, it is ridiculous that she couldn't have made me take to the board, as I had to take the ordinance allowing me to do it by the board. I had asked Dawn and was told that the directors, so she's your boss, do exactly what she says. Our department had its own county counselor or lawyer to oversee all our leases, easements, and about everything we do. I sent up the request for county council to enact the ordinance allowing for the lease of a building up to $10,000 a month for 10 years. County let me know that they are very busy, and if I wanted it back expedited for this director, then I should just write it myself. So I did. Which was neat for me that I actually wrote a county ordinance or law. That's my initials on it. I set up to go to the board before the ordinance is enacted. This director marches in my office and said I couldn't wait, so I just signed the landlord lease, and I'm already moved in paying him out of my direct discretionary fund. I was shocked. It was actually the wrong thing for a director to do. The county has a very specific lease that covers all of itself for liability and a whole other slew of possible issues. I told Dawn, and he said we better get that lease done right away. I told Dawn after looking at the lease, she is renting the building for the full $10,000 a month? Question mark. I had figured it was worth somewhere around $6,000, maybe $7,000 per month, stretching it. It wasn't my call anymore, as she had already executed a lease with the landlord. So I drew up the new county council lease. The new county lease had county council approve it. The board enacted my new ordinance, so they made my 3 copies and had Jerk, the head of general services, sign it. I was pretty happy with myself that I got all this done as quick as I did. I marched downstairs to the director's office to hand her proper lease. Yeah, we did it, right? When I walked in the office, several of the gals in there gave me a look and a couple snickers. I wondered, was my zipper down? Did I have a booger? I then opened the door to the director's office, and there is a new gal sitting in the director's throne. I say throne, right? It's good. Director's throne. She then pointed and laughingly, hysterically, as I handed her the new proper key lease on her desk. If you ever seen Austin Powers as the janitor is laughing and pointing at him during the awards ceremony because Daddy wasn't there, it's like ha 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 ha. It was a lot like that. She let me know she was the new director and that the old director just retired. She also told me that the building that the old director had to have was her boyfriend's, and they're getting married. How nice that the director who retires with full benefits and a nice directory salary had to screw the county for another $3,000 to $4,000 a month. Wonder if they're still together. Oh well, I did get to write a law, not a good one, but I'm not a lawyer. Oh man, my push for the director's position was going well in my mind, but I think I was the only one who was seeing it that way. I figured getting a lot of project done was a good thing, but I was told they were considering shrinking my department as I handled so much. People were retiring and my workload justified less people to handle the work. This was a big thing in government. I went from being the golden boy to very quickly being a problem. I really didn't know why back then, but I do wonder now if my attitude about honesty prevented me from cracking that glass ceiling at the county. The old $15 lunch probably didn't help. I was now in charge of all the county leases, and I looked over them daily to see what I could do, could I do when needed. Each lease had to adjust every year based off of a CPI index. I had to monitor leases and send extensions to the board when needed. I was, of course, interested in the county's biggest lease. It was for the main human resources building or welfare office. I had been involved in getting new energy-efficient lighting installed with that SCE deal, so we were friends already. That building was the main one, so I got to know the staff there and took some interest in it. The building was a full city block long. The lease was due to adjust according to the CPI index as normal. The current price for that county was paying back then was $265,000 a month. It's a huge number, but besides that, I did seem to me to be quite high. It was a 99-year lease set to adjust every year according to the CPI index. 100-year lease. I pulled the lease to check it out and was surprised to see that the index it was adjusting off of every year was for an A-size city like Los Angeles. Uh-oh. Bakersfield is more like a B- to C-size city for adjusting. So after 50 years of adjusting the growth rate of Los Angeles, this lease was out of whack. Way too high. The owner of the building was a Japanese corporation. They're not even in America. In the lease, there was a right to readjust the rental amount at year 50 to the current market. I am sure 60 years ago they didn't know how fast Bakersfield was going to grow, but this provision had a year 50 allowed for a correction. It was super stoked. Figured this was just what I needed to secure the top job. I brought it to Don and the jerk, thinking I was doing a super sweet work. I was told never go over Don and the powers that be, and it wasn't worth my time. They got mad at me for just looking at it. It wasn't exactly too new, but was not to allocate time to. But what is in a quick email a day, you know? They didn't want me allocating my time to even looking at it. I actually really enjoyed doing the negotiation. I did anyways. My emails were translated to Japanese, and it was really cool. It's a little thing I enjoy. Without any support from the county and without allocating any time to it, I was able to get a reduction in the rent of that building of full $3,000 to $4,000 a month. Just a drop in the bucket, but to me, I just paid for my own salary of my position forever. I used to work for a man named Brent who taught me that I needed to make more money income than my salary every month to justify my employment. I did let them all know I just paid my own salary and savings forever and was not given any kind word about it. By this time, the decision had already been made about my future. I was asked to train a guy who transferred over from the assessor's office. He was an old county guy who knew nothing about our department. I was asked to teach him the job and was told he would also be applying for Dom's position, the director's job I was applying for. I spent a couple of weeks training Mr. Assessor to do our job. I then told the County Human Resources Department that my manager's experience as a general contractor building grocery stores, they said it didn't count and that my application for director was being denied. What was so stupid is that Mr. Assessor's experience doing financial transactions, selling bonds or financial portfolios was okay. I used to build shopping centers, and that experience didn't count for leasing them. Not to mention, I was a real estate broker, not an agent. It didn't matter to the county. I was on my way out, and that was decided long before Don retired. On Mr. Assessor's first day as Director of Property Management, and his first task was to suspend me for a week without pay. Magoo, this new guy from Parks, was the one who gave me the news. Apparently, I was being suspended without pay for being too aggressive in completing my work. Right? Crazy. And they said other people had also billed hours to projects that were on my list, so they weren't just my projects. I was the only one doing anything on them. Whatever. I was more than shocked in the 30 seconds I had sat considering this bullshit. It went through so much thought about all I do and all I've done. It all culminated with this, F this bullshit. I left the card Magoo had given me that said, I owe you for doing the sirens on the back with Magoo's name and the Parks Department on the front, then was paused, then he just scoffed at me. I was then told within 20 minutes or so I was fired for my response to being reprimanded, which was the cussing. Wasn't much cussing. Couple F U's. I yelled, I quit at the same time. I then marched my ass down the hall, past Magoo's office, saying F you right to the head of General Service, and yelled that he was a backstabbing piece of shit, which he is. His name's Jerk. And yeah. I was then escorted out of the building by security. It was actually really uncool because I was making a second home there. Even had art on my walls. I was escorted back to my office the next day or so to get out my things. It does seem that in government, if you're honest, then you're never going to crack the glass ceiling. I worked with some really great people and also with some absolute cheating, lying, stealing pieces of shit. This went down as soon as Don had retired. Looking back, he was trying to look out for me. He was a good guy. Janice and Gloria were also great gals. I was explaining to my boys the other day when we were talking about the current president and all the corruption. I told the boys that people in charge, they are corrupt, only surround themselves with people who are corrupt or people who are willing to look the other way. I was neither. I could say now I am proud I didn't fit in with good old government politics, and I love this county and I'm proud of what I've accomplished for it. Hell, I even got me a medal.